London, England, 1875. Miss Juliana Mercer stared at her reflection in the polished silver mirror, a woman she scarcely recognized. Her golden hair had been arranged in an elaborate cascade of curls, adorned with pearl pins that winked like tears in the candlelight. The wedding gown, a fortune in ivory silk and Brussels lace, felt like a shroud upon her shoulders. "You look every inch the future Marchioness," her mother pronounced, adjusting the veil with trembling fingers. "The Marquess of Harrowgate will be pleased." Juliana swallowed the bitter laugh that threatened to escape her lips. The Marquess of Harrowgate, Lord Zachary Jennings, had never been pleased by anything in his life, least of all her. In the handful of formal meetings that had constituted their courtship, his grey eyes had regarded her with the same detached interest one might show a newly acquired painting, a possession to be displayed rather than cherished. "A fortunate match," her mother continued, misinterpreting Juliana's silence for bridal nerves. "Arranged since your birth, and now, at last, to be fulfilled. Your father would have been so proud." Proud! Yes, her father would have been proud to see his daughter sold to save the family name. The debts he had left behind after his death 3 years prior had nearly ruined them. Only this marriage, this contract signed in the cradles of 2 families, stood between the Mercers and complete disgrace. "I shall leave you a moment of privacy before we depart for the church," her mother said, pressing a kiss to Juliana's forehead. "Remember, a lady's greatest virtue is her duty." When the door closed, Juliana's composure crumbled. In the mirror, she saw not a bride but a prisoner. At 21, she had cultivated the accomplishments expected of a nobleman's daughter. She played the pianoforte tolerably, spoke passable French, and could embroider linens with exquisite precision. Yet beneath these polished veneers beat the heart of a woman who had secretly devoured forbidden novels and scientific journals, who dreamed of a marriage based on mutual respect and affection rather than bloodlines and bank accounts. "A lady's greatest virtue is her duty," Juliana whispered to her reflection, repeating the words that had shaped her existence. Deep down, she knew the truth that dared not speak its name: love was a luxury reserved for those with neither title nor debt, not for women like her, whose futures had been mortgaged before they drew their first breath. The knock at her bedroom door startled her from her reverie. Expecting her mother's return, she was surprised to find her cousin Catherine instead, face flushed with exertion. "Juliana," Catherine whispered urgently, closing the door behind her. "There's a letter. It arrived just now." "A letter? From whom?" Catherine glanced nervously at the door before pressing a cream-colored envelope into Juliana's hands. "From Lady Harrowgate herself." Juliana's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. The Dowager Marchioness had always made her disapproval of the match clear, considering the Mercer family's diminished circumstances unsuitable for an alliance with the ancient Jennings line. The elegant script flowed across the page like poison. "Miss Mercer, it is with reluctant candor that I write to you on this, the day of your wedding to my son. While Zachary will honor his father's agreement, you should know that his heart belongs to another. A more suitable match was within our grasp last season, but duty to a deathbed promise has prevailed. You shall have his name and title, but never his devotion. I trust you shall conduct yourself with the dignity befitting the station you are about to assume, regardless of your unfortunate origins. Lady Augusta Jennings, Dowager Marchioness of Harrowgate." The letter fluttered from Juliana's fingers to the floor. "I cannot do this," she whispered, suddenly unable to draw breath. The room seemed to close in around her, the weight of the wedding gown crushing her ribs. "I cannot bind myself to a man who resents me before we've even spoken our vows." Catherine seized her hands. "Then don't." "What choice do I have?" "Mother will never survive the scandal." "There is always a choice, Julie." Catherine's eyes gleamed with unexpected determination. "My brother Thomas departs for Edinburgh on the afternoon train." He could take you with him, just until you decide what you truly want. Flee my own wedding. The idea was preposterous, ruinous, unthinkable, and yet, for the first time that day, Juliana felt something other than despair. She felt alive. 30 minutes later, her wedding gown exchanged for a modest traveling dress, Juliana slipped through the servants' entrance with only a small valise and the pearl necklace that had been her grandmother's. The betrayal of her mother's trust cut deep, but the thought of shackling herself to a man who had been forced to marry her by a deathbed promise was unbearable. As the carriage pulled away from the only home she had ever known, Juliana watched London recede into the distance. By now, the wedding guests would be assembled at St. George's. Lord Harrowgate would be standing at the altar, perhaps secretly relieved at his narrow escape from a loveless union. "You've done the right thing," Catherine assured her, squeezing her hand. But as the carriage rattled toward the railway station, Juliana wasn't convinced. Had she chosen freedom, or simply traded one form of disgrace for another? Lord Zachary Jennings, Marquess of Harrowgate, stood at the altar of St. George's, Hanover Square, watching the minutes tick by on his pocket watch. The church pews were filled with the cream of London society, their whispers growing louder as the bride's delay stretched from fashionably late to concerning. "Perhaps she's merely attending to some last-minute detail," suggested his friend, Lord Blackwood, who stood beside him as best man. Zachary snapped the watch closed. Perhaps. But a strange foreboding had settled in his chest. At 32, Zachary had long resigned himself to this match. The arrangement between his father and Sir William Mercer had been made when Miss Mercer was still in swaddling clothes, a business transaction sealed with a handshake rather than affection. After his father's death 5 years ago, Zachary had considered breaking the engagement, but his father's final words had been a reminder of the promise. "There comes the mother, without the bride," Lord Blackwood muttered as Lady Mercer hurried up the aisle, her face ashen. "Lord Harrowgate," she began, her voice barely audible, "I regret to inform you that my daughter is indisposed." The church erupted in hushed exclamations. Zachary felt a strange mixture of surprise and, was it relief, wash over him. "Indisposed, madam? On our wedding day?" Lady Mercer's composure crumbled. "She's gone," she whispered. "Juliana has fled." 3 hours later, as the scandal spread through London like wildfire, Zachary sat alone in his study at Harrowgate House. The humiliation of being left at the altar should have filled him with rage, yet he felt only a peculiar emptiness, followed by a growing curiosity. What manner of woman had the courage to defy not only her family but all of society by fleeing her own wedding? His mother swept into the room, her face a mask of fury. "This disgrace will follow us for seasons," she hissed. "I've already dispatched inquiries. We shall find her, force her to honor the contract, and then she can be quietly dispatched to one of the country estates." "No." The word surprised Zachary as much as it did his mother. "I beg your pardon." "I said no, mother." He rose from his chair, suddenly certain. "Miss Mercer has made her feelings clear. I won't force a woman to marry me against her will." "It's not about will, Zachary, it's about duty. And that little fortune hunter has just publicly humiliated one of England's oldest titles." Zachary's laugh was hollow. "Fortune hunter? The Mercers are nearly destitute. If anything, I was the fortune being hunted, or rather, our name was. Perhaps Miss Mercer simply wanted more than a cold transaction." "What nonsense are you speaking?" "This is precisely why I wrote to warn her that your heart belonged elsewhere. I hope to prepare the girl for a marriage of convenience, not give her license to flee." Zachary stilled. "You wrote to her? Today? What exactly did you say?" When his mother explained the contents of her letter, Zachary felt a cold fury unlike anything he had ever experienced. "You told her my heart belonged to another?" "That was a lie. A necessary one. Lady Victoria Stanton would have been a far more appropriate match. I merely wished the Mercer girl to understand her place." "Her place," he repeated slowly. "And what place is that, mother? To be my broodmare while I pursue my actual interests elsewhere? Is that the marriage you envision for your son?" Without waiting for an answer, Zachary strode from the room. For the first time in years, he felt a stirring of something beyond the duty and obligation that had governed his life since his father's death. Miss Juliana Mercer had rejected the cold transaction of their arranged marriage. And somehow, against all reason, he found himself admiring her for it. Edinburgh proved to be both a refuge and a prison. Juliana found lodgings in a modest boarding house under the name Mrs. Julia Mills, supposedly a young widow. The ruse afforded her some protection from curious questions, but it could not shield her from the reality of her situation. Her small savings would not last forever, and the scandal of her flight would have reached every corner of respectable society by now. 2 months after her escape, she sat in a small tea shop, scanning the advertisements in the local newspaper. The pearl necklace had been sold to pay for room and board, leaving her with few options beyond seeking employment. "Governesses wanted," she read aloud, tracing her finger down the column. "Experienced seamstress required. Lady's companion needed for elderly widow." None of these positions would accept her without references, which she could not provide without revealing her identity. The reality of her situation was becoming clearer with each passing day. Freedom had its price, and that price was growing steeper. The bell above the tea shop door jingled, and Juliana glanced up reflexively. Her heart stopped. There, framed in the doorway like an apparition, stood Lord Zachary Jennings, Marquess of Harrowgate, the man she had left at the altar. He saw her immediately, those penetrating grey eyes widening in recognition. Juliana froze, the newspaper trembling in her grasp. How had he found her? What would he do now? Demand she return to London in disgrace? Force her to honour the contract their fathers had made? To her astonishment, he simply approached her table and bowed slightly. "Miss Mercer, may I join you?" Unable to speak, she nodded. He took the seat opposite her, removing his hat and gloves with unhurried precision. Up close, she noticed details she had overlooked during their formal meetings: the slight crease between his brows, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his temples, the unexpected warmth in eyes she had remembered as cold. "You've led me on quite a chase," he said finally. "I never asked to be pursued, my lord." "No, indeed. You made your feelings about our arrangement quite clear." There was no anger in his tone, merely observation. "May I ask why Edinburgh?" Juliana folded the newspaper, her chin lifting slightly. "My cousin's brother lives here. He provided initial assistance." "I see." His gaze drifted to the newspaper, noting the employment advertisements she had been studying. "And now you seek employment?" As whatever will have me," she answered with unexpected honesty. "A governess, perhaps, though without references, my prospects are limited." Lord Harrowgate studied her for a long moment. "You left a life of privilege for this? Uncertainty, anonymity, possibly poverty." The question struck at the heart of the doubt that had plagued her for weeks. Had she been foolish? Selfish? The future she had chosen was precarious at best. "I left a life without choice," Juliana replied softly. "I could not bear to enter a marriage knowing I was resented before it even began." His brow furrowed. "Resented? What gave you that impression?" She hesitated, then decided truth was her only remaining currency. Your mother wrote to me on our wedding day. She made it clear your heart belonged to another, that you were honoring the contract out of duty alone. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, though not directed at her. My mother had no right to speak for me. Her letter was not authorized. Was it untrue? The part about my heart belonging to another? Yes, entirely fabricated. My mother had her own candidate in mind for my wife. The part about duty? He shrugged slightly. That was accurate enough. We were both fulfilling an obligation neither of us chose. Juliana absorbed this, uncertain how to feel. Why have you come, Lord Harrowgate? To bring me back in disgrace? I came because I was curious. His admission surprised her. What kind of woman defies convention so completely? What kind of courage does that require? I found myself intrigued. Intrigued, she repeated, unsure whether to be flattered or insulted. I am not an exotic specimen to be studied, my lord. His lips curved in what might have been his first genuine smile in her presence. No, you are not. You are, however, the only person in recent memory who has treated me as a man rather than a title. You rejected the Marquess of Harrowgate. I find I rather respect that. The conversation was taking such an unexpected turn that Juliana found herself at a loss. What happens now? That depends on you, Miss Mercer. I will not force you to honor our father's contract. However, I would like to propose an alternative. I'm listening. Return to London with me, not as my bride, but as my guest. Stay at my aunt's house in Mayfair. She is currently in Bath and the house stands empty. Take 3 months to consider whether you might wish to know me as Zachary, not merely as Lord Harrowgate. If, at the end of that time, you still find the prospect of marriage to me intolerable, I shall provide you with a modest annuity and excellent references, allowing you to pursue whatever life you choose. Juliana stared at him in disbelief. Why would you make such an offer? His expression grew thoughtful. Because in fleeing our wedding, you showed more honesty than I have managed in years of performing my duties without question. Perhaps we both deserve a chance to discover what lies beyond obligation. It was madness. Returning to London meant facing the scandal she had created, the mother she had disappointed, the society that would judge her mercilessly. Yet staying in Edinburgh offered little beyond a slow decline into genteel poverty. And if I agree to this arrangement, what would be expected of me? Only your company at suitable social engagements, your conversation, and your honesty. Nothing more. Juliana took a deep breath. Very well, Lord Harrowgate. I accept your proposal. For the first time, she saw genuine warmth transform his features. Excellent. And please, if we are to begin anew, call me Zachary. The return to London was not as devastating as Juliana had feared. Installed in Lady Whitmore's elegant townhouse in Mayfair, with a respectable companion hired to preserve appearances, she found herself insulated from the worst of society's judgment. The story circulating, carefully managed by Lord Harrowgate himself, was that Miss Mercer had suffered a nervous collapse before the wedding, necessitating a period of recovery in Scotland. Their engagement remained intact, with the wedding merely postponed rather than abandoned. This fiction afforded Juliana a precarious position on the edges of respectability. Some drawing rooms remained closed to her, but others, intrigued by the drama and Lord Harrowgate's continued patronage, cautiously welcomed her return. "You've managed the impossible," remarked Lady Stanton during an afternoon musicale. "A scandal transformed into an romance. Quite clever." Juliana smiled politely, though the woman's tone suggested anything but admiration. "Sometimes fate has unusual designs, my lady." "Indeed." Lady Stanton's gaze drifted meaningfully toward Zachary, who stood conversing with several gentlemen across the room. Though I wonder if Lord Harrowgate shares your poetic view of fate. Before Juliana could respond, Zachary himself approached, offering his arm. Miss Mercer, I believe they're about to begin the next performance. Shall we find our seats? As they moved through the crowd, Juliana felt the weight of curious stares. Lady Stanton seems particularly interested in our arrangement, she murmured. Victoria has always been interested in arrangements, he replied, his voice neutral. Particularly those involving titles and fortunes. Is she the woman your mother preferred? His glance was sharp but not unkind. Yes. The daughter of an earl, impeccable lineage, substantial dowry. On paper, a perfect match. And in reality? In reality, she reminds me of a perfect June day, lovely to look at, pleasant enough in small doses, but ultimately, there's nothing beneath the surface that one hasn't seen 100 times before. The unexpected candor startled a laugh from Juliana. Lord Harrowgate, I do believe that's the most unguarded thing you've ever said to me. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Perhaps you're becoming a bad influence, Miss Mercer. Over the following weeks, their arrangement settled into an unexpected rhythm. 3 evenings a week, they attended suitable social events together. Twice weekly, he called at Lady Whitmore's house for tea and conversation. On Sundays, they walked in Hyde Park, carefully chaperoned but afforded enough privacy for genuine dialogue. Slowly, Juliana began to glimpse the man beneath the Marquess. Zachary was well-read, with a surprising passion for astronomy and natural sciences. He possessed a dry wit that emerged when he felt comfortable. Most startling of all, he listened to her, truly listened, when she spoke of her own interests in literature and philosophy, never dismissing her thoughts as the frivolous musings of a female mind. You're not at all what I expected, she confessed one afternoon as they strolled beneath the autumn-tinged trees of Hyde Park, their companion a discreet distance behind them. What did you expect? A cold, distant aristocrat concerned only with bloodlines and estate management. He chuckled. I can be cold and distant when the occasion demands it. As for estate management, well, that does occupy a significant portion of my time. But is that all you see when you look at me now? Juliana studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw softened by the afternoon light. No, she admitted quietly. I see a man who carries the weight of centuries of expectation on his shoulders. Who performs his duty without complaint but perhaps wonders what life might have been if he'd been born the second son instead of the heir. Zachary stopped walking, his expression unreadable. You see rather more than most, Miss Mercer. Is that a compliment or an accusation? I haven't decided yet. His gaze was intense, searching her face as if looking for answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. You fled our wedding because you believed I would resent you, that I already did. What do you believe now? The directness of the question caught her off guard. I believe you are more complex than I initially judged. That perhaps we both deserve to make choices based on more than obligation. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability she had never witnessed before. For a brief moment, Juliana glimpsed what might be possible between them if they could both set aside the weight of expectation. Then the moment passed as their companion caught up, reminding them of the carefully constructed boundaries of their arrangement. 3 days later, everything changed. Juliana received a morning visitor she had not expected, her mother. Lady Mercer sat stiffly in the drawing-room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've come to understand this unusual arrangement you've made with Lord Harrowgate. Juliana poured tea with steady hands, though her heart raced. It seemed the most sensible solution. Sensible? Her mother's laugh held no humor. My dear, you fled your own wedding. You abandoned your family and obligations. There was nothing sensible about it. I couldn't marry a man I didn't know, who I believed had no interest in me beyond fulfilling a contract. And now? After your scandalous behavior, Lord Harrowgate has magnanimously offered you a second chance, a chance many would say you don't deserve. Will you throw away this opportunity as well? Juliana set down her teacup carefully. Mother, I don't view it as an opportunity to be seized or discarded. Lord Harrowgate and I are attempting to discover whether we might suit beyond the arrangement our fathers made. Lady Mercer's expression softened slightly. And have you discovered anything of note? The question gave Juliana pause. Had she? Over the past weeks, she had found herself looking forward to Zachary's visits, enjoying their conversations, admiring his intellect and unexpected kindness. But did that constitute a foundation for marriage? I discovered he is not the cold, distant figure I imagined, she admitted. But I don't yet know if that's enough. Her mother reached across the small table to take her hand. Juliana, listen to me carefully. Love, the kind depicted in your novels, is a luxury few in our position can afford. Respect, compatibility, shared values, these are the foundations of a successful marriage. If you found these with Lord Harrowgate, don't discard them in search of some elusive passion that may never materialize. After her mother departed, Juliana stood by the window, watching the street below as afternoon shadows lengthened. Was her mother right? Had she been chasing an impossible ideal, rejecting a perfectly acceptable match because it lacked the romantic trappings she had read about in novels? That evening, a note arrived from Zachary, requesting her company at the Royal Observatory the following night. The unusual invitation intrigued her, and she sent her acceptance without hesitation. The observatory at Greenwich was quiet when they arrived, the main public areas closed for the evening. A distinguished gentleman greeted them at a side entrance. Lord Harrowgate, excellent timing. The skies are particularly clear tonight. He bowed to Juliana. Miss Mercer, I presume? I am Professor Hamilton, an old friend of your companion. He mentioned your interest in natural philosophy. Zachary offered no explanation as they followed the professor up a winding staircase to a domed observation room. A massive telescope dominated the space, its brass fittings gleaming in the low lamplight. Saturn is particularly visible tonight, Professor Hamilton explained, adjusting the telescope. I shall leave you to your observations. Simply pull the bell rope when you've finished. When they were alone, Zachary gestured to the telescope. Would you care to look? Puzzled but curious, Juliana stepped forward and bent to peer through the eyepiece. She gasped. There, suspended in velvety blackness, was a perfect golden sphere encircled by delicate rings. It's beautiful, she breathed. I remembered your mention of reading Somerville's work on astronomy, Zachary said quietly. You said you'd always wondered what the planets truly looked like beyond the illustrations in books. Juliana straightened, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. You arranged all this because of a passing comment I made weeks ago. Was it merely a passing comment? It seemed to me a glimpse of what truly interests you, what brings light to your eyes when you speak of it. He stepped closer. Juliana, I've spent my life fulfilling expectations without questioning them. You questioned everything, including whether a marriage without affection was worth having at all. And now, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I find myself in the unexpected position of hoping you might consider me worthy of your affection, not merely your duty. He took her hand gently. Our 3 months are nearly complete. Soon you must decide whether to honor our original contract, accept the alternative I offered, or chart an entirely different course. Before you decide, I wanted you to know that these weeks have shown me what might be possible between two people who choose each other freely." Juliana felt something shift within her, a realization that the man before her had transformed in her eyes from an obligation to a possibility. "I don't know what to say." "You needn't say anything now. Just look at the stars a while longer, and perhaps consider that some arrangements, even those begun in duty, might end in something more profound." As they stood together beneath the dome, the vastness of the universe spread above them, Juliana felt the last of her resistance beginning to crumble. The Marquis she had fled was not the man who stood beside her now, or perhaps he had been there all along, waiting to be discovered beneath the weight of title and expectation. 1 week later, disaster struck. Juliana's careful reintegration into society collapsed when the London Gazette published a devastating article. "Curious case of the fleeing bride society has been abuzz with speculation regarding the postponed nuptials of Lord H. and Miss M." This publication can now reveal that contrary to circulating tales of a nervous condition requiring Scottish air, the bride in question actually fled her wedding day entirely, leaving Lord H. waiting at the altar. Sources close to the family report that the jilted Marquis has since pursued his reluctant bride, offering extraordinary concessions to salvage the match. One must wonder, has the noble lord's pride overcome his judgment? Or perhaps there are financial considerations compelling this unusual forgiveness. The article went on to speculate about Juliana's character and motives in the most unflattering terms possible. By noon, invitations that had cautiously been extended were withdrawn. By evening, even the most tolerant drawing rooms closed their doors. Zachary arrived at Lady Whitmore's house to find Juliana pale but composed, a copy of the Gazette crumpled on the table beside her. "I've traced the source of the story," he said without preamble. "Lady Victoria Stanton. Apparently, her patience for our reconciliation has run its course." "It hardly matters who is responsible," Juliana replied. "The damage is done. I cannot remain in London now. This will pass. All scandals do, eventually." She shook her head. "Not this one. Not for me. A man may survive 100 indiscretions, but a woman needs only one to be ruined forever." She rose, crossing to the window. "I think it's time we acknowledge that our experiment has reached its conclusion." "Has it?" His voice was quiet. "And what conclusion have you reached, Juliana?" She turned to face him, summoning her courage. "That I cannot marry you, Zachary." He went very still. "May I ask why? Is it still because you believe I would resent you?" "No." The admission cost her, but she owed him honesty. "It's because I've come to care for you too much to bind you to this scandal. Your position, your reputation, they would never recover from a marriage to me now. I cannot do that to you. So you would reject me to protect me." A strange light kindled in his eyes. "How very noble. And yet, I don't recall asking for your protection." "Zachary, no, allow me to speak plainly, as you once did by fleeing our wedding." He crossed the room to stand before her. "You believed our father's arrangement would trap you in a loveless marriage. I believed it was simply my duty to fulfill. We were both wrong. These past months have shown me that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most profound discoveries." "The scandal, damn the scandal," he said with sudden intensity. "Damn Lady Stanton and her petty vengeance. Damn my mother's interference and society's judgment. For the first time in my life, I found someone who sees me, not Lord Harrowgate, not the Marquis, but me. Do you think I would surrender that because of some malicious gossip?" Juliana stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would still marry me, knowing what this will cost you." "I would marry you because I've discovered what it would cost me not to." He took her hands in his. Juliana Mercer, you fled our wedding because you believed love should be more than duty. I propose to you now, not because of any contract or obligation, but because I have found in you a partner worthy of both my respect and my heart. Tears blurred Juliana's vision. Are you certain? Once done, it cannot be undone. I have never been more certain of anything. He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his features. Besides, think of the delicious irony, the woman who fled her wedding, now freely choosing the very man she once rejected. It will give society something to gossip about for years to come. A laugh escaped her, unexpected and liberating. When you put it that way, how could I possibly refuse? 3 weeks later, in a quiet ceremony attended only by close family and a few loyal friends, Juliana Mercer became the Marchioness of Harrowgate. As they exchanged vows, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment, how her desperate flight from a cold arrangement had ultimately led her back to the same man, transformed by choice and understanding into someone she could genuinely love. Lady Augusta Jennings, the Dowager Marchioness, maintained a rigid smile throughout the ceremony. When she approached the couple afterward, her expression was carefully neutral. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said stiffly. "Though I cannot pretend to understand this unconventional path you've chosen." Zachary placed his hand over Juliana's. "Sometimes, Mother, the path one is expected to follow is not the one that leads to happiness. I believe my father would have understood that, in the end." The Dowager's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps. He was always more sentimental than practical." She regarded Juliana with new consideration. "You have shown unexpected fortitude, my dear. That, at least, is a quality worthy of our family." Coming from Lady Augusta, it was tantamount to a blessing. Later that evening, as they stood alone in the library of Harrowgate House, Juliana found herself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "My fleeing our wedding? The scandal? All of it?" Zachary considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused you, and your mother. But the rest?" He shook his head. "Had you appeared dutifully at the altar that day, we would have married as strangers fulfilling a contract. Now we marry as two people who have chosen each other with open eyes. How could I regret that?" "Then I suppose I must thank Lady Augusta for her interfering letter," Juliana said with a hint of mischief. "Without it, I might never have found the courage to flee. And I might never have found the courage to pursue what I truly wanted, rather than what duty dictated." He drew her into his arms. "So perhaps we both owe my mother a debt of gratitude, though I suggest we never inform her of that fact." Juliana laughed, resting her head against his chest. In fleeing from the cold Marquis she had feared, she had inadvertently discovered the man she could love. Their beginning had been unconventional, scandalous even, but the truth they had found together was worth every whisper, every raised eyebrow, every challenge they had faced. Some arrangements, even those begun in duty, might indeed end in something far more profound than either of them had dared to imagine.